Hi guys, I'm Urmi Jindal. I'm the National Officer for SCORA and MSCI, and we'll be doing our fourth and last session of Stride with Pride today. It's going to be with the point of view. I'm just going to be requesting them to join us. Hi Smita. So we'll just start. I'm Urmi Jindal. I'm the National Officer for SCORA, and welcome everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the fourth session of our live series of Stride with Pride. It's an Instagram live session that we do to spread awareness about LGBTQIA plus community and their healthcare, and how as we as medical professionals, it's so important for us to be aware of such things. And we have covered the history of Pride, the different kinds of flags, the barriers the LGBTQIA community faces in the healthcare setup, and what as we as future healthcare professionals can do to combat this. Today with us we have a very special guest from Point of View. Smita. Smita is a queer feminist and currently working at the Point of View on gender, sexuality, and technology. And now I'll just hand over to Day as they'll start.
Hi, thank you for having me here. So, will you be asking questions? Should I just talk, or how would you prefer to do it?
I'll ask questions, but maybe you could give talk a little more about yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Smita. I work with Point of View, like Molly mentioned, and I specifically work on the sexuality, gender, and technology program. And I just like literally 2 days ago moved to Delhi from Bombay. So yeah, so it's in the hectic like things.
Okay. So I'll start with the questions. So today we'll be talking about a little bit about same-sex marriages and family planning and the role of social media on the queer community. So we'll begin with the first question. What is the current situation of same-sex marriages in India, even after the historical judgment of the Section 377?
Sure. So I think there's something which we need to make a clear distinction of, right? Like, firstly, it's that the judgment on 377 was decriminalizing sex against the order of nature, in quotes. It did not actually give rights. They recommended that the government give rights to LGBTQ persons, but that did not actually happen, right? So when and I think it's important that we remember that decriminalization does not equal to legalization. So when it may be decriminalized right now, it does not mean that like tomorrow gay couples could be kicked out of house, trans persons could be violated, people could be removed from their jobs without any reason except for the fact that they are LGBTQ, right? And I think this is something which we need to remember because equating the two means that we will stop fighting, and that is something which we cannot afford to do. Yeah, and this is with 377. The other thing is that there's also something called the Transgender Persons Right Bill of Act, which is there in India, which again is highly problematic for many reasons. One of the things is that it even now you need to get a document from the government which will certify you as transgender or no, which is ridiculous. And it goes explicitly against the judgment, the NALSA judgment, which said that people should be allowed to identify their own gender, right? It also, in case of violence faced by trans persons, the punishment for that and the legal remedy for that is much lower than what would happen if a cis person faced violence, right? There has been no affirmative action actually being, there's nothing which is steadily, what is known as affirmative action, right? There is no law which says that LGBTQ persons should not be removed from job and prohibiting that There is nothing which says that education institutions must have reservations for trans persons, or anything which says that schools should actually actively stop bullying of LGBTQ persons and kids, right? Without any of this, then how much do we actually celebrate, no? Especially because 377 is a fight which was fought one too many times already, right? So all of this is there. So same-sex marriage is very far away. Firstly, like I would also like to say that same-sex marriage in itself is a very annoying term, because same-sex marriage indicates that there are only certain numbers of sex, firstly, and then gender is a spectrum. So where do other genders fall within this? Also, are we only pushing for same gender marriage? Is that what we want? No, we are saying that um, our rights, an individual's rights, should not be one dependent on marriage. Two, the state should not have a say in, tomorrow, if I have a partner, the government cannot and should not be able to tell me that this person will be, I can share my insurance with this person, and or I can't do that unless I'm married. Marriage actually, the structure of marriage and actively discriminates against people who choose to exist outside the structure, right? One is that, and two is, another thing is that when I understand that this is a really, really important issue for a lot of queer people, without doubt. And anyone who wants to get married should definitely have the opportunity, the rights to do so, right? But that should not be the marker on how you get your rights, one. And two, I think we need to move away from the conversation of marriage a little more, because in a lot of ways, marriage is a very heteronormative structure. It's meant for people who are cisgender, means they identify with the gender that they were born into, or like assigned gender that they were assigned at birth. Um, those who feel attracted to, in a conventional heterosexual sense, to the opposite gender, right? And it's a structure which came about for this. It's a casteist structure, it's a Brahminical structure which came about with the intention of, preserving purity or whatever, with the intention of maintaining borders, which is very beneficial to the government, very beneficial to people, capitalist structures. So I think it's also important that we move away from this structure a little more, right? And talk about rights at a much more macro level rather than have it centered around marriage itself, right?
Yes. Okay. Um, so we'll move on to the next question. Family planning, is something like every couple looks forward to. And do you think homosexual couples, or like as you said, like people who don't fit into the heteronormative, um, do they, have difficulties in going through legal procedures like adoption, surrogacy?
I mean, to be fair, even heterosexual couples have troubles with that. Women have trouble with that. Persons with disabilities have trouble with all of this, right? Because we are not a country, like for a country with 1.25 billion people, like we are really, really reluctant towards adoption and surrogacy or anything which is not biological. um, and which indirectly it has, there are several issues with this, right? One is that you implicitly and explicitly create a structure in who is real family and who is not, which directly affects queer persons, because chosen families are a very important support system and support structure for queer persons, queer and trans persons. One, that. Two, it's this, I think before we go even to family planning, no, I think there are several steps before that which are a hindrance. If I go to a gynecologist's office tomorrow, I feel I get into fights because they see me as not a woman, and they wonder why I'm there alone, and a lot of questions with the, and this is gynecologist specifically, but apart from that, even hospitals are extremely hostile spaces for queer and trans persons, right? And this is like I remember there was an instance where a trans woman um, uh, had to be taken to a hospital, and when they took her to a hospital, the hospital refused to admit her because they couldn't understand whether to put her in a men's ward or the women's ward. And this is inspired, and the idea is that trans women are women. The firstly, like, why this question, and secondly, as doctors, as healthcare providers, as like, isn't your duty to save a life and not get stuck in the technicalities of all of these things, right? And
Yeah.
if this isn't prejudice, I don't know what is, really. And this is one. So family planning becomes a very distant dream in all of this, no? How do you go to family planning if I can't go because I broke my leg? Or if I can't go to get, like, my periods are not coming properly, so I want to go get checked up. But when I go there, then I face issues like being asked questions like what are you, not who are you, what are you, and are you sure you're in the right hospital? Why are you going inside? Right, and this is not to say that there are no doctors who are queer friendly, who understand and who are inclusive. That's not my point, because there are several of them, right? There are several doctors who actually do their job very properly, very professionally, and in a very inclusive, sensitive manner. But sometimes you don't even reach the doctors. The hindrance and the violence happens in the reception area, with the receptionist, with the nurse, with anyone who's prepping you to meet the doctor, right? All of these spaces are points of violence. Like, previously when I was living in Bombay, I had basically picked a fight with all the gynecologists in the area. And then when I needed to find one, I'm like, oh no, now where do I go? Right? And this has been, and when I asked my queer friends and non-binary friends in Bombay, who are Bombay people who have been born and brought up in Bombay, unlike me, who moved there several years ago, they were like, no, I've never been to a gynecologist because the one time I tried, it didn't go well. And that's not okay, right? And so
Absolutely.
before you get to, yeah, and before you get to family planning, when all of these hindrances are there, when non-binary and trans breast cancer survivors don't get support, don't have a community who they can fall back on, who have trouble accessing, medical services for these things. So I don't know if I'm not saying that this has to be solved and then family planning is an issue, but I'm saying because it's not a hierarchy within it, all of these have to be worked on simultaneously without question. But it's essential that we look at it in a macro level, that we look at the whole system, because family planning cannot happen without any of these steps, right? And also without changes in laws which work around adoption, surrogacy, etc. So yeah, that I think that's what I would like to say about it.
Okay. What do you think are the effects of social media on the queer community?
I think my face is frozen. Is it?
Yeah, I think you're lagging a little.
One sec.
They're facing some internet issues. I will request them to join again.
Sorry.
Hi. No, that's all right.
Yes.
So, I was asking, what do you think are the effects of social media on the queer community?
This is a very interesting question because I think it's firstly important to recognize that the internet is an extremely, extremely important space for queer and trans communities. Because, like, and there is research which shows that in many countries, and even many, like, smaller cities and towns in India and many countries across the world, the queer community and the queer movement would not have started without the internet, right? Like, I remember a friend sharing with me about how the Chandigarh Pride was actually planned by three people who met online, right? And and this is the case in many many places. I know that trans men in Manipur are connected and are able to support each other because of a WhatsApp group. Same with trans men who live in the NCR region, right? And this is all possible because of the internet. In India, like very long time ago, there used to be Reddit chat rooms and Yahoo chat rooms, um, which were the spaces where gay men and like LGBT persons met each other for the first time, right? And you kind of got to know that, oh, I'm not the only one, and that's really important when you're, when you see all around you that there's no one else like you, right? And for
Definitely.
LGBT persons, it's also that you find your friends, you find your community, you find information, you find partners, you explore your sexuality, you explore your gender identity. All of this is completely online, right? So I think like it's a space which I think has kind of like fast forwarded the movement and sometimes acceptance and your own like life journey ahead in many ways.
Yeah.
Uh, and social media is a very interesting space because social media is, if you look at social media, say like 10 years ago, right, it was a very different from what it is today. And same with the internet for that matter, but social media in particular, simply because of the sheer number of people who are there on social media, right? What is really fun is that social media was never meant for being co-opted by LGBTQ persons, but that is what is happening every time there, right? Like when Facebook secret groups and private groups were allowed, well, people took to it like honey, like what do they say, bees to honey, flies to honey, some insect to honey, but you get the meaning.
Yeah, I
Um,
get that.
and yeah, because like, I remember like when I was a baby queer, when I was like very young and coming out in 2010-11, I was in Chennai, and I met someone only because of a website where you could post like things saying that, hey, I'm visiting this city. Are there any queer people who would like to meet up? Right? And this person then told me that there is a secret group on Facebook, which is the name of the group is a Tamil innuendo for vagina, and it's so unless you know what it is, you won't understand the group. And it's a secret group for specifically lesbian and bisexual women who were in the city, because a lot of the other spaces were being taken over by gay and bisexual men, and they weren't finding space to talk, right? And this is Facebook never thought this would be the case, that a group of like Tamil lesbians from Chennai would like make a secret group, and this will be the space where they can talk about their issues. But that's what happened. This is not to say, and social media in many ways has actively disregarded LGBTQ lives online in many ways. Like, for example, a few years ago, Facebook had something called the real name policy, which was in place, which means that you have to use your name as per your official documents, or which is used in correspondence, to as the only name which can be used on your profile on Facebook, right? This was extremely dangerous because a lot of trans persons, for example, were not out at their workplaces. They had alternative profiles. And I think it's also important to distinguish between fake profiles and alternative profiles, because fake profiles are what we call and say is made with the intention of oppressing someone else, with the intention of harassing someone else. Whereas alternative profiles are just your profiles, but different parts of yourself in different identities. And that should be completely okay. Because one of the key tenets of the internet is anonymity and pseudonymity, right? Why are people being able to talk out, speak up? Because they know that they are safe, or as safe as possible. Like, safe is a relative word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if social media platforms, when they started out, really were meant to help LGBTQ persons. It was taken over by us and by as well as like, and the real name policy also affected like, in India, a lot of women, and especially unmarried women and young girls, are not allowed to have Facebook profiles, and they are also not allowed to, especially not put up their photos on the profiles.
Yes.
So
Yes.
alternative profiles is how they use the medium, how they learnt about it, right? A lot of domestic violence survivors said that they used Facebook under alternative like profiles, because that was the only way they could speak up away and like kind of have a space away from their abuser. And all of this, and which is why like social media has been a really important space for a lot of marginalized communities, like the disability rights community and conversations, and disability rights activists speak up extremely like powerfully and very vocally online. And right, and this kind of in many instances help them deal with the fact that they may be in a country which is inaccessible. And same for LGBTQ persons, for sex workers, for women who may be in different difficult situations, right? For conversations on Dalit rights and Adivasi rights, all of this will not be happening as much as it is happening because of social media. because it kind of has helped move the gatekeepers away and kind of surpassed that. So you can take the internet and you can make a little niche of your own and start talking
Hmm.
there. And if there are people whose thoughts resonate with yours, who identify with what you're saying, you start connecting. And I think that's a really, really powerful thing of social media. And but this is not to say that the internet intermediaries and social media companies have been very welcoming of all these different identities. They have been profiting of it, yes. But you report violence on social, which takes place on social media, and there is next to no response. It's not transparent. Sometimes they don't even respond to your reporting reports of like abuse, or they say that it doesn't violate their community standards, whatever that means, right? And I think this is, it's a double, it's like, I don't know, it's like a coin. So you toss it constantly
Right.
and see what do you have to do. It's kind of like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Okay. So, even although the virtual world of social media has empowered many people from the queer community to accept themselves, do you think they receive the same acceptance and love in reality, or is it just, on social media?
um I don't know. Firstly, like, I don't know if I want to make that distinction because I think the way we live our lives today, and even before for that matter, I don't think the virtual space and technology and your life online is any less real than your physical world. Firstly, that because one is virtual, one is physical, yes. One is online, one is offline, yes. But is one less real than the other? I don't know. I don't think so. Right?
Mm.
So it's not that happiness here does not mean happiness. And by here, I mean social media. Um, One, that. And two, I don't think see the thing is like in today's world, like when we look at it, the phone is kind of like an extension of our arm, right? We
Yeah.
have it all the time on us, and when we talk about ourselves, when we talk about Smita or Molly, are our physical identities the only, is this the only us? What about our avatars online? What about our profiles online? Are they not part of us? Right? Like, do our bodies really stop right here, or do they also go on online is a question. So in that way, does that happiness not come offline? Is one. And two, another thing is that like the boundaries between online and offline have kind of merged so much in recent times that what happens offline goes online and vice versa. It's kind of like permeable, right? And so a lot of the gender norms which we have in the offline space has gone online, which is why the violence faced by queer and trans persons, by women, all of this is happening because these gender norms haven't been broken, but the medium has shifted, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how much. I mean, I don't know if we can know how much of the online discourse really translates into offline action, because I know people, like I remember when the rainbow filters were a thing on Facebook, right? I remember someone who was extremely homophobic to me in my hostel had put up this rainbow filter, and I was like, "What? Excuse me? Now you've come?" And I mean, I like to believe that that person changed and evolved their opinion, but it's also very possible that they didn't. So I don't know. Love and acceptance can come in many different forms, right? It can come from people you have never met in life, whose voice you don't know, you may not know what they look like, and it can completely be lacking from people who are supposed to be your family, who are supposed to be your immediate support system. But I don't think one takes away from the other, or one is lesser than the other. Um, does and I think like these are all fights which happen simultaneously. So I'm not certain if we can say one influences the other in that way, but I think that the online space gives you at least a little corner of your world where you don't have to pretend otherwise.
Definitely. Definitely. So, speaking about all the good things of social media and how it gives you kind of like a safe space Do you think there have been any negative effects of social media on the queer community?
Yes, because the same people who harass us offline are the ones who also have phones. So what to do? No,
Okay. Yeah.
like the same one who will call names to a trans woman who is walking on the road is the same bugger who has a phone and comments the same thing now online. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, like and because we don't have a robust reporting mechanism by social media platforms, and laws which we can actually employ to address crimes of like violent consent violation, um, a lot of violence which is perpetrated towards trans persons and queer persons is also there's no way for redressal, right? So that's a problem, which is also what I meant by affirmative action. And like when you are when decriminalization does not mean legalization. I may not be a criminal for the way I have sex today compared to yesterday, but if I'm harassed online or if I'm harassed in person, I still cannot go to the police, right? And if I go to the police, I will have to put on a facade which is acceptable to them. Otherwise, my case will not be handled well. And many people don't even have this luxury, right? Because you may not be supported by a family, and all of these things are there. There is also violence which is perpetrated even on like places like dating apps, because and this is something which I think all of us need to be conscious and need to introspect a little more on, like on how, like, just because someone is gay or lesbian or bisexual or trans, it's not their only identity. They also have many other identities, right? So I have seen so on like on dating apps which are for like gay and bisexual men, it's very common to see posts like only jats, no chamar, and posts like no sissies, no femmes, right? And no all of these words which are casually thrown around. So what it clearly shows is that when these people may be gay, their casteism, their privilege of caste, their privilege of religion, all of this is still very much in place, and there has been no introspection on this level, right? And this is also and this is also seen when you talk to gay men about women. There may be a lot of them who are misogynist, right? Or with trans persons or queer women who still very much practice the binary of gender of man or woman, and how a man should look like or how a woman should look like. And these are all gender norms which have not been challenged. So when they don't get challenged, they just move from space to space, right? And the legal system does not help any of this.
Yeah.
There is one law which actually looks at consent violation online, but it's not used as much. The other law, which is used more frequently to address sexual harassment in the online space, is a very morality based law, what is commonly known as the obscenity provision, right? So, and even if you have laws in place, if the police is not trained to handle queer people and trans people, and trans persons particularly face a lot of violence in the hands of police and other authorities, then how do so it's a systemic problem which has to be addressed. I don't think it can be simply said as problem only online or offline anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. So if I think we're done with the questions. If anybody in the audience has any questions or doubts for Smita, they can just type it in and they will be all addressed. We'll wait for a minute or two for the doubts and questions. But I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and giving us your valuable time.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to speak, and
Definitely.
I hope it was helpful.
Definitely it was. It really, gave us a different perspective, on how to you definitely about especially about the online and offline and how, the problem is all like integrated and definitely. So I don't see any questions coming, but we can still wait for a minute or two and then we can. So there are two questions. One is there anything we can do as doctors to help?
Is there anything we can do as doctors? I would say one is that uh, I mean, I am saying this after, I'm not saying this as a doctor myself or any of that, but from my experience with doctors in many places and also understanding the prejudices which exist within science and within medicine. Uh, One is I would strongly ask all doctors who are here to uh, kind of go beyond your textbook as well, because I don't think your textbooks really cover identities beyond man or woman, and even in that, barely woman, right? And there is research which
Yes.
shows that a lot of the information shared about the human body is around the male body, not the female body, and also how there is very little research on the women's body, and because of that, we don't know many things about it. I strongly believe if there was money put in that research, we would have figured out how to stop periods non-harmfully. But what do you do? Um, but I think more than that, I think if you get patients who don't fit into the norms of like male, female, or gender or sexuality wise, just be kind, just be sensitive, right? People are not expecting everyone who they meet to be completely aware of LGBTQ issues, but I think everyone deserves some kindness and sensitivity. And if that is not, if that is seen as not in the purview of doctors, then just be professional, right? And professional means that you don't dismiss problems that you're bringing to you. That means that you don't ask questions which are insensitive, which are hurtful, which are unnecessary. You don't give advice which is unnecessary just because you're in a position of power in that moment, right? And it is to be conscious of that power dynamics when someone comes to meet you. And if you're doctors who are already very sensitive, very inclusive, talk to your staff about it. Talk to your nurse, talk to your receptionist, talk to your, ward boys, talk to them about, there will be different kinds of people who are coming here, right? And you need to be okay with that. Tell them that it's and try to make your hospital a safe space, right? And I think that's all
Yes,
anyone can ask.
definitely. Importance of a safe space is unsaid. Um, the next question we have is, can you tell us more about the dating apps
Uh,
and
is there some
you know,
is there something person who asked about the dating apps? Is there something specific that you would like to know about dating apps, or I think I'm frozen again.
yes, I was just about to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Just waiting for Smita to join again.
Hi.
Right.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah,
Dating apps was a question.
yeah. I don't think the person has completed the question. We can go to the next one. Um, how can we ensure that we are actually being inclusive and give everyone a safe space to open up?
Hello.
Yeah,
Hi.
hello.
Sorry. Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, yes, definitely. Um, how can we ensure that we are actually being inclusive and give everyone a safe space to open up?
Uh, I mean, it really depends upon who is asking this question. So, if you're asking as an what do you say, a person, an everyday person, and not a doctor, I would say first things first is that stop using language which is homophobic and transphobic and misogynist, because for you words like chakka might not mean anything, but they are extremely violent, extremely harmful. And when you use words like that, it really like means something for the, it connotes something for anyone who's around you who may be queer, right? Like even saying things like, oh, that's so gay. Why is it that so gay? Why is it gay? Like, change your language a little. Don't use ableist language, misogynist language, homophobic or transphobic language. I think that is a good start, because, or if you do, slip up, it happens. Apologize for it and move on, right? And when you apologize, when people can see that you're making a conscious effort, they know that you're someone who they could possibly talk to. Your friends might know that if there's a queer or trans person in your friend circle, they may feel safe talking to you. um, if you're organizing events, or if you're organizing I don't know, conference, webinar, events, make sure that your registration form is inclusive, right? Not just male, woman, not just like a mysterious other. What is other? There's no like, other is not a gender identity. Other is like nothing, right? Like what? And also, like, when men and women get like individual boxes, then why do everyone else have to crowd in the other, right? Without having any space to specify. I think making a safe space is like in a physical space, have a gender neutral bathroom where people can use without like being afraid of being attacked in bathrooms or being subjected to violence in bathrooms, right? And this is actually not as difficult as people make it seem like, because if you think about it, the bathroom in your houses are gender neutral. Everyone goes to the same bathroom. It's not like, the women in the house have one bathroom and men have another bathroom, right? Um, so it's simple things like this. And I think it's just, when you don't know something, say, I don't know. And that in itself creates a safe space, because they know that you're willing to listen. People know that you're willing to listen and you're willing to accept that you don't know something, right? And no one has the expectation that everyone will know about everything, because our lived realities are very different, right? I don't expect my heterosexual friends to exactly understand what I'm going through, but all I expect from them is to listen to me, right? And not like pretend like they know more than me about my life. I think these are some very simple ways in which you can, and also more importantly, if you see homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, call it out, right? And not call it out in the sense of like naming and shaming the other person, but like say, hey, that's not okay. Why are you saying this, right? And that actually will honestly save a lot of energy for queer and trans persons and women in many many places.
Yeah. The next question we have: if marriages were inclusive of the queer community, would it be better than moving away from it from the queer community point of view?
I mean, I can't speak for all the queer community, in all honesty. um, I think like when we, like I said, like I think those who want to get married should definitely have the right to get married without question. But I think when we enter a structure like marriage, we need to be aware of what kind of a structure we are entering, right? I'm not saying don't do it, but be aware of what you're doing, right? Marriage is inherently an heteronormative structure which was meant to keep communities apart, which was meant to control women, which was meant to exercise control over certain properties, meant to exercise control over who marries whom, and religion do you marry into, what caste do you marry into, what locality, language do you marry into. It's inherently a structure which is meant to control all of this. So if you're going to enter it, be aware of this, right? Your individual marriage may be very different, but if you're entering it, be aware of it. More importantly, if you're entering it, be aware of your privilege that comes with getting married, right? Because there is a lot of privilege that comes with that. So be aware of it and acknowledge it. I think like, I don't know about like all of the queer community, but I think I would rather push for a movement. I would rather be part of a movement which is pushing for rights for all, and not just married people or just for marriage. I would like to have rights to pass on my property to my partner. I would like my partner to be able, my partner or my chosen family to be able to take last calls if I, God forbid, if I've been like a grievous accident or like if I'm grievously ill tomorrow. I would want my partner or my friend to take the call on what has to be done. I would like to share my insurance with people who I care about. And I do not want to be married for any of this, right? So I would rather push for rights like that. I would rather push for trans persons to have redressal mechanisms and rights to counter the violence that they face. I would like to have rights to work. I would have like to have rights to protection of my employment. I would like to have rights to like protection of my education, right? And I think I would want a movement which is right centered, which is fighting for all of us and not just some of us.
I think with the last question, what suggestions do you have for us to spread awareness or change the perspective of people around us towards this community? I think you're lagging again.
Uh, Now,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
now it's good.
I would say
Um,
firstly, if possible, give space because I mean, if a straight cisgender person is coming to give me gyan about LGBTQ issues, I wouldn't listen to it. I would rather say that if someone is asking you to talk about the community, say, hey, why don't you call this person from the community, right? And try to give space, try to, because sometimes, yes, I agree, the topics need to be brought to the table, but I think we are beyond the point where only topics are brought to the table. I think we are at a point where we need to share the table, we need to make space at the table, we need to make money to bring people to this table and have them speak for themselves, right? I think that is one. Another thing is that no one wants pity. Everyone wants equality. They want rights. They want equitable access. They want equitable rights, and all of these things. No one wants pity. So don't become a champion for the community unless you've been asked to or you've checked with them. Once again, I'm speaking for all of the queer community in India, of course. But I would say like some of that, and just like you know talk to people, ask them what they want, ask them how you can be of help, say I don't know, call out people if you see something happening, like go say something about it, right? Like don't stay silent. I think that's what is more important than anything today, really.
that's great, definitely. So I think done. Just want to thank you so much again for joining us and clearing our concepts and thoughts about so many important topics and teaching us the importance of equity in general. And it was really nice meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here, and it was lovely meeting you too. And thank you for
Definitely.
all the people who asked questions. So
Thank you. Bye.